Hi all. Today we will be discussing Aristotle's Poetics. Actually, it's a very vast concept or it's a very vast topic to be dealt. I can give you a very brief summary or the points related to Poetics. I'm not going that detail because it is very vast. So I'll be giving you the most important or the most relevant points as far as Aristotle's Poetics is concerned. So basically, Aristotle's Poetics seeks to address the different kinds of poetry. It comes under the literary criticism part. We have already discussed the different theories of English criticism, literary criticism. Now off to Aristotle's Poetics. So it addresses different kinds of poetry, the structure of a good poem and the division of a poem into different component parts, etc. So Aristotle defines poetry as a medium of imitation. Aristotle defines poetry as a medium of imitation that seeks to represent or duplicate life through character, emotion, or action. That's it. So it's all about poetry. It is just a medium or an agent. So poetry is a medium or agent through which it represents or duplicate or imitate life as it is. So he defines poetry very broadly in his Poetics. So which includes epic poetry, tragedy, comedy, and even some kinds of music. So according to Aristotle, tragedy came from the efforts of poets to present men as a nobler or better than they are in real life. Understood? So as far as tragedy is concerned, tragedy is an effort of poets to modify man's real character. On the other hand, take comedy for example. He says comedy shows a lower type of person. So that is his concept. Tragedy represents man as a nobler or a better person than he is, whereas comedy shows a lower type of a person, or it reveals humans to be worse than they are in real life. Okay. And next, coming to epic poetry, he says epic poetry imitates a nobleman like a tragedy, but only has one type of meter. Unlike tragedy, which can have several, and epic poetry has only one type of meter, and it is in narrative form. That is the difference. And another idea or another important aspect of Aristotle's poetry is about the plot. So as far as Aristotle is concerned, plot is the soul of tragedy, because action is paramount to the significance of a drama, and all other elements are subsidiary. So plot is the soul of tragedy as far as Aristotle is concerned, and all other facts like the characters or any other aspect will be subsidiary only. So he says a plot must have a beginning, a middle, and end, and it must also be universal in significance and have a determinate structure also, and maintain a unity of theme and a purpose. So plot is the soul of tragedy. It should have a proper beginning, it should have a proper middle and end or a conclusion. And plot also must contain elements of astonishment, element of reversal, and he says element of reversal as the peripecia or something. Okay, then recognition and suffering. So the plot must go through all these aspects. Okay, so reversal is an ironic twist or a change by which the main action of the story comes full circle. So it is one of these are the inevitable parts of a plot. When he says plot is the soul of tragedy, it must have all these content. Then only it will become the soul of that particular tragedy. It must contains all these facts like astonishment, reversal, recognition, and suffering. So recognition compared to reversal is the change from ignorance to knowledge. Okay, so the main character or the protagonist should go through these aspects. So there should be a reversal, that means an ironic twist should be there to complete the full circle, and same way recognition, the character, the protagonist or the main character should go through the course of recognition. That means he should go through the idea of ignorance to knowledge, usually involving people coming to understand one another's true identities. That is what Aristotle meant by recognition. Then coming to next important aspect as far as tragedy is concerned, tragedy's plot is concerned, is suffering. He says suffering should be another aspect or another idea that the plot must have. That is suffering. Suffering is destructive or the painful action. The protagonist should go through the course of painful actions, which is often the result of a reversal or recognition. Then only we can call that particular plot as the soul of that tragedy. So all three elements should be there to create the catharsis. So when all these things comes together, like astonishment, reversal, recognition, and suffering, when all these stuffs comes together, there will be catharsis. There will be catharsis, which is the engenderment of fear. It is called catharsis, and pity and fear. Pity and fear should be evoked in the minds of the audience. So when the characters exhibit all these ideas or all these things in the plot, catharsis occurs. Pity for the tragic hero's plight and fear that his fate might befall us. Then when it comes to character, another important element in a tragedy is character. A poet should aim for 4 things. Just like plot, character is also very important, and the character should aim for 4 things. Which are they? First, the hero must be good and thus manifest moral purpose in his speech. Okay, so the hero must be good enough to give to authenticity to what he says. Then coming to second, the hero must have propriety, or we say the valor, manly valor, that is it. The hero must exhibit a manly valor. So that is what Aristotle says. Then thirdly, the hero must be true to life. The protagonist in the story must be true to life. And finally, he must be consistent. So these are the essential qualities that a hero in a tragedy should possess. So tragedy and epic poetry fall into the same categories. Okay, so simple, complex, ethical, or pathetic. So tragedy must be simple. It can have complex in the sense driven by reversal and recognition, and it must be ethical in the sense moral, and pathetic in the sense it should be driven by passion. Okay, so there are a few differences again when we compare tragedy and epic. However, first, an epic poem does not use song or spectacle to achieve its cathartic, effect. That is the main thing. When we differentiate tragedy and epic poetry. Secondly, epics often cannot be presented at a single sitting. It is not possible to present it. So, epic poems we know it is very lengthy. It is very wide in concept. So, it is not. It is impossible. Literally, it is not possible to be presented at a single sitting. Whereas tragedies are usually able to be seen in a single viewing. Compared to epic poetry, tragedy is short in its setting. So finally, the heroic measure of epic poetry is hexameter, where tragedy often uses other forms of meter to achieve the rhythms of different characters' speech. So these are the differences when we compare tragedy and epic poetry. These are the things you have to keep in your mind. Okay. Next is Aristotle also lays out the elements of successful imitation. So these are the important ideas that you have to refer as far as Aristotle's Poetics is concerned. So he also brings out the elements of successful imitation. So as he said, poetry, as far as Aristotle is concerned, poetry is nothing but imitation of the real life of humans. So the poet must imitate either things as they are, the things as they are brought to be, or things as they ought to be. So either the real things, or what the poet thought to be, or what it ought to be. Understood? So the poet must also imitate in action and language. Language in the sense preferably metaphors or contemporary words. Using metaphors and contemporary words, he can exhibit his imitation of action. So errors come when the poet imitates incorrectly and thus destroys the essence of the poem, or when the poet accidentally makes an error, that is called factual error. Okay, so Aristotle does not believe that factual errors sabotage the entire work. Errors that limit or compromise the unity of a given work, however, are much more consequential. So Aristotle concludes by tackling the question of whether the epic or tragic form is higher. So most critics of his time argued that a tragedy was for an inferior audience that required the gesture of performers, while epic poetry was for a cultivated audience, which could filter a narrative form through their own imaginations. So in reply, Aristotle notes that epic recitation can be marred by overdone gesticulation in the same way as a tragedy. Moreover, a tragedy, like poetry, can produce its effect without action. Its power is in the mere reading. So Aristotle argues that tragedy is in fact superior to epics. That is the another important point that you have to note, which is very important. Aristotle is of the view that tragedy is tragic effect is somewhat superior to the epic, because it has all the epic elements as well as spectacle and music to provide an indulgent pleasure for the audience. So as far as Aristotle is concerned, tragedy is more entertaining, tragedy is more pleasurable as far as the audience is concerned when it is compared with the epic tragedy. So tragedy, despite the arguments of other critics, the higher art for Aristotle. So these are the basic thing as far as Aristotle Poetics is concerned. Okay, thank you.